Hi, good morning. This is January 21, 2022, 97th birthday of Dr. Udai Pareek. On this day, I fondly remember our long years of association, which started in the year 1969 and continued till he died in the year 2010. I think the most memorable part of our association is the books that we have written together. These are the ones which will continue to be available for those who are interested in understanding Dr. Udai Pareek particularly, and me as his colleague and co-author of many of these books. I think Udai has about 60 books, of which 15 were jointly by me, and I have about 50, in which 15 were jointly by Dr. Udai Pareek and me. Each of these books has a story. And largely, I think my induction into writing, certainly I would credit Dr. Udai Pareek. Though I suppose I had some flavor for writing, as I remember in my college days itself in Loyola College, I used to write small articles in Telugu. And later in Osmania University, when Dr. Parameshwaran encouraged us, we wrote, both my colleague Dr. Harigopal and I wrote a paper after experimenting in the lab on the phenomena of size constancy. So I suppose there is something of a flavor for writing inherent, maybe, which has come out of maybe whatever circumstances I was brought in. But I think working with Udai has really nurtured it, brought it out. When I joined the National Institute of Health Administration as an ICMR research associate, working with Dr. Pareek for a project on motivation training for mental health. He frequently mentioned to me about his desire to start a journal, a quarterly journal called Indian Behavioural Science Abstracts. He is known for his contributions of consolidating all the behavioral science research done in India, behavioral science research on India by outsiders or by Indians in other countries and so on. I think he came up with a series of behavioral science directories between 1960 and 65, I think, when he was at SIET Institute. I think this was a great service that he has done in behavioral sciences. When he mentioned that he wants to start a regular quarterly of Indian Behavioral Science Abstracts and shared his idea with me, I took a letter from him introducing me to all the libraries in Delhi and visited a large number of libraries: IIT Library, USIS Library, then IARI Library, Library of Delhi Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi University itself, IIPA Library. It was a great experience of discovering Delhi and its academic storehouses in the year 1969-70. I think 1970 we brought out the first issue of the Behavioral Science Abstracts. This contained abstracts of all the articles published by Indian behavioral scientists or any others in India in foreign journals and so on. Out of the 250 abstracts that came out of the first issue, I think I have done about 240, 245. It's only the remaining less than 10 that were contributed by other colleagues. So I think it is this kind of a hard work, and once you mention it, you complete the task. That is what has led to bringing out the Indian Behavioral Science Abstracts. Dr. J.M. Oja of Mansayan published it, and Indian Behavioral Science Abstracts were published for the next 5 to 6 years. After that, the ICSR took it over and converted into Indian Psychological Abstracts, which I am told it continues there. So I was associate editor. This was nice of Udai to make me as an associate editor of Indian Behavioral Science Abstracts. I don't call it a publication in the traditional sense, but the first real publication that came out of our joint work was the Handbook of Psychological and Social Instruments. For this, the foundation was laid by Udai. He had an ICSSR project. We were in Udaipur at that point of time. And the project contained collecting all psychometric tools, psychological and social instruments across the country developed in India and putting it in a handbook. I think once Udai gives the task and then says that we should do it, I put all the students of Udaipur University on the job. We use it to Udai would write letters to people across all universities, collect the data, we summarize those, we put it in a particular format, and we made the manuscript available sometime in the year 1972-73. The same year, Udai was requested to do a book on a status study of population research, because those are the days when population or family planning were very much in the minds of everyone, particularly the country, and we wanted to see what is the behavioral science research that is available in India or anything on India across the world. So we started collecting a lot of literature on behavioral sciences. The data were all collected at Udaipur, and by the time Dr. Pareek moved to IIM Ahmedabad in 1973, so when we got all the abstracts with us, Dr. Pareek asked me, why don't you come over? I went to Ahmedabad. In fact, I stayed with him for a couple of months. It was the summer months of University of Udaipur, summer vacation. So I stayed with him. His quarters was very close to IIM. He didn't yet get a quarter in the institute. He was in Satkar Society. And every day I used it to, those days there were no computers. These were all type machines only. And I used it to handwritten notes, I think a lot of abstracts. I think there must have been about 900 or more abstracts, all put together, classified, put into pieces of paper, and then they have to be put into different categories and so on. So 2 months of hard work, and we had a great typist, Kuppuswamy, who earlier used to work with Ishwar Dayal. Later he became the secretary of Dr. Udai Pareek. So every day I walk to Udai Pareek's office and hand over a part of the manuscript, and Kuppuswamy would type it. I think all this was done in a matter of about a week to 10 days. Almost about 500-600 pages of the manuscript was typed. And it was sent to Family Planning Foundation of India, a Tata enterprise, who was sponsoring this particular project. I in fact went to Delhi. I remember spending a couple of days with Family Planning Foundation, going through the proofs given by Tata McGraw-Hill. I must say this was practically the first book that was published jointly with Dr. Udai Pareek, a status study of population research in behavioral sciences. There was another on demography and probably a third one on medicine and so on. But this particular one was my first publication with Udai, and it came from it was completed when I was at IIM. While I was working with him, I was told about a project called Entrepreneurship project. It's evaluation of the effort by the 4 corporations in Gujarat. They wanted to compare whether motivation, the behavioral science inputs made any difference or not. While I was working with Udai, he introduced me. I was still in Udaipur University. He introduced me to Dr. B.G. Shah, who was coordinating this particular project. Dr. B.G. Shah, Vijay Gaikwad, Udai Pareek, and later I think a few others, one Dr. Shetty and one entrepreneur locally and so on, they all formed a team. So B.G. Shah asked me if I'm interested in helping him as a kind of a research associate. By the time I have not got an offer, or nor did I think of joining IIM, but I was simply requested if I can be of help from Udaipur University. I agreed, and first thing that I had done was to understand this entrepreneurship effort, and visited a achievement motivation training being conducted by one Anil Trivedi. Anil Trivedi was the project leader, and he was promoting achievement motivation and entrepreneurship. He is the person in charge. So I went to Kappadvanj, spent about 3 to 4 days staying myself. I checked into one hotel where I think there were hardly any facilities. I think it is this trip that got me to contract jaundice. So I went back to Udaipur, and for a month or more than a month, I was sick with jaundice. However, I think this My work and understanding achievement motivation training formed the basis of our agreeing to evaluate the program. And that was the time I was interviewed at IIM, and I met different people, including Ravi Mathai. And Ravi was starting uh, education systems project, and therefore he was looking for someone to help him in the education systems. In fact, Ravi and Udai were planning to start an education systems unit. I think they were probably impressed with my PhD work on how medical colleges impact medical students, because a number of people who I met, including Vijayendra Tripathi, Professor Samuel Paul, and others, talked about my PhD thesis, which was on institutional environment and professional socialization of medical students. I'm mentioning this because this particular project was guided by Udai, and later, of course, I didn't, since this was my PhD work, I published it as a book called Doctors in Making. But this particular work was significant because this was the time when I got introduced to entrepreneurship. And the evaluation project, which I have done from December 1973 till about February, March, visiting a lot of entrepreneurs in Gujarat, which included Ahmedabad itself, Baroda, Surat, and interviewing them and studying the impact of behavioral sciences, we came up with a beautiful kind of a report. And also I started a course called Entrepreneurial Laboratory in Entrepreneurial Motivation. All this led to our publishing a handbook of developing entrepreneurship. The book was published about 5 years later with both Udai and I as authors, published by Samasti, and later I think picked up by Learning Systems, an enterprise started in Delhi by Pandit Patankar, Manohar Nadkarni, and others. So this is another book which became almost, I am told, a Bible for many people who are interested in developing entrepreneurship. Handbook of Developing Entrepreneurship. Now this book has an interesting story. I did a large part of it, completed the book, we sent it to press, and it is supposed to be authored by Udai Pareek and T.V. Rao. But when I got the book, I found the cover page Udai Pareek and Rao, inside Rao and Pareek. So I was very surprised when I went and asked Dr. Pareek. He said that they made a mistake. They should have put on the cover page also you as the first author. You have done most of the work, and I don't know why they changed this sequence. Maybe for marketing purposes. That was very interesting. First of all, I didn't expect mine to be first author, but Professor Pareek inside made sure that it is there, but the cover page somebody else changed it and so on. This is another interesting book on entrepreneurship, the Handbook of Entrepreneurship, and later we both, when we were working in Malaysia, we were doing training trainers in entrepreneurship, both at Mara Institute of Technology as well as at the MID of Malaysia. Udai went as UNDP consultant. I was working with some people in NERDA, National Entrepreneurial Research and Development Association. Then later he invited me to join him. So when I joined him as a UNDP consultant, we were putting all the work that we were doing together. And putting these work together, we published a book called Developing Motivation Through Experiencing. This book is popular even today. It is out of print. It was published by Oxford and IBH. But these are the books on entrepreneurship, both the Handbook of Developing Entrepreneurs and Developing Motivation Through Experiencing are the two books which I think I always cherish working with Udai. And for long years, I think they continue to be guiding forces. Now, whenever I look at entrepreneurship programs, I keep asking people, have you consulted this book? Because what we have talked of at that point of time is relevant today. I'll continue this in the second series.